Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar series, Tedstrom Talks. This is the sixth in a series of webinars that we are producing to give our clients, business associates, friends, and family pertinent and important information on COVID-19 and other interesting and timely topics. We plan to have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation, so please use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen as your video and your microphones have been muted. You can ask questions throughout the presentation and Peter and Greg will answer at the end. I would like to introduce you to Peter Tedstrom, founder and chief advisor of Tedstrom Wealth Advisors. Peter has 35 plus years experience as a certified financial planner. He has been consistently recognized through awards and recognition as one of the country's top financial advisors. Peter, go right ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you again. And I'm really excited about our webinar today with Tedstrom Talks. As Barbie said, this is the sixth in our series, and we're planning on doing these regularly to just bring timely and informational topics to you, not necessarily related to our industry, but informational topics that are of interest to you or potentially of interest to you. I'm especially delighted to be working with Greg and talking to Greg today, because Greg and I have known each other for a long time, and both of us had hair back then, I think, Greg.
I still have some, thank you.
Yeah, well there. And yeah, so we've had a wonderful relationship over the years. When you were with the Denver Business Journal, you were down the hall, so we ran into each other regularly, and then went over to Channel 9, and that's probably how many people have seen your face and are aware of you. So thank you so much for being here today, Greg. We're going to talk about innovation in the time of COVID. And as just before the webinar started, we were talking about that old adage, necessity is the mother of invention. And it'd be interesting to hear what some of the inventions are that are coming about. So let me tell you a little bit about Greg before we get started. Greg is the innovation coordinator for the city of Westminster. And in this role, he coordinates the internal and external innovation initiatives and programs for the city. Prior to being appointed to this position, Greg has served as president and CEO of the Metro North Chamber of Commerce, a regional organization spanning 12 cities, 4 counties, and 6 school districts in northern Colorado. Greg is a well-known fixture in the business community because he was an anchor reporter for 9 News for more than 2 decades. So we were talking a little bit about what kinds of things are coming out of this pandemic. We talked about what the economy is going through, society, telemedicine, medical devices. As I mentioned to you, in our portfolios, we're adding a medical devices position and a technology position, specifically because we think those 2 areas of the economy and the investment world will have some good performance over the foreseeable future. And then, Greg, you were talking about the autonomous vehicle that you've just launched today. So tell us about that and whatever else you might want to tell us about innovation.
Yeah, this is kind of hot off the press for you, just for you, Peter. So in your audience, so this is good. We're going to be holding a press event actually on Thursday to kind of officially announce this. But one of the things that we look at is our innovation strategies at the City of Westminster is something called Smart Cities Technology. So not everything that we do in innovation is revolving around technology, but it is a big focus of ours, because certainly as you're investing in it, cities are investing in it. As we look to the future of making ourselves more efficient, perhaps finding some new revenue streams, and certainly being able to streamline our costs. Now, in the time of COVID, it might seem a little out of alignment that we would be looking at innovative ways of using technology and how could we possibly do that outside of the medical perhaps stream. But we had an opportunity to partner up with a company called Easy Mile, which is known for autonomous vehicles. They actually did the autonomous vehicle testing for about a year or so out at the airport, the Panasonic building. They have since discontinued that pilot project, but I had approached them because in our downtown Westminster project, which is very vibrant and moving forward, in about a year and a half, we're going to be building an underground tunnel connecting our bus rapid transit system along US 36 to our downtown. And we're hoping to put in an autonomous vehicle. Well, Easy Mile called me and said, hey, all of our cities had canceled our pilot contracts. We heard you're kind of weird. Would you like to take one on? And I said, sure, why not? So we brainstormed for about a day, and we created a problem statement around food insecurity in the city of Westminster and how to deliver food from our storage facility, which is a city-owned facility, about 2 blocks or so away to our food bank. And just today, we launched an autonomous vehicle that's making a few runs a day, completely autonomous, which is, by the way, the first time in North America they have done that. It runs through some parking lots and down a few alleys and on one of our main streets along 72nd with plenty of escorts, by the way, just making sure our traffic patterns are okay. And it's a creative way for us to pilot this technology at no cost to the city to serve our community and certainly serve our nonprofit community and especially our growing home food bank in a time of great need. And so it's pretty cool. And it's kind of a cute little bus, and they just load it up with boxes and send it on its way, and it comes back in about 45 minutes, load it up again, send it on its way. It's a pretty neat technology. So that's just one of the many things that we've been launching over the last 8 to 10 weeks.
Well, that's fascinating. I asked you the question, will this be something that private citizens will become used to, since we're maybe not going to be eating at restaurants as much or wanting to go to the grocery store, at least for the foreseeable future? Will we see autonomous cars come up to our homes?
Not for a long time, but however, I would say that we're going to continue to see this technology more and more accepted in certain specific uses. And so the use that we have designed for this shuttle works very well for it. What we'll probably do in about a year or so in our downtown pilot project will work very well for it. But it's fascinating. We're gathering a lot of data. So it's not just about transporting food. We're looking at data every day and looking to see how this technology might work during a normal rush hour, for example, a normal street, normal stoplight patterns and traffic and people and pedestrian and bicycles. So we're learning that at some point in time, this technology will be much more widespread, but I think it's going to be a long time, at least in a municipality.
Interesting. I'm thinking about, our common mode of transportation if we're not willing to drive with Uber or with Lyft. Do you see Uber and Lyft using these autonomous vehicles in a way that will make sense to the average person?
Yeah, Uber and Lyft, as a matter of fact, have been doing a lot of testing of these autonomous vehicles, and you will continue to see that. What I'm thinking, though, it kind of require a lot of technology from municipalities and a lot of cooperation before we see it widely distributed on the city street, for example. But where you're going to see it for sure, and you're already seeing a lot more freight companies on interstate travel using autonomous trucks and coming up with whole trucking systems, that is where we're going to see this first. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of payoff immediately.
Interesting. So that brings up and we didn't talk about this, but I think you'll have some thoughts on it. And that is, unemployment is at 50-year highs, 14, 15, 16%, and going higher, as some might believe that we might get to 25 or even 30%. Technology and autonomous vehicles in particular take away a job. So is there innovation that you are seeing behind the scenes that might change our way of thinking about job loss as it relates to technology, so that we're not concerned about people losing their jobs because we're advancing the way we are?
Yeah, I think what we might see, Peter, is the great opportunity will be for us to integrate this into mass transit. Now, what we're seeing, or what we're predicting we're going to see in the short run here, is that the use of mass transit is going to decline very sharply. So it's almost been at a standstill as we were at stay-at-home orders.
Mm-hmm.
So getting people to feel comfortable to get back on a train or a bus is going to take some time. I think this might accelerate, I'm just guessing here, might accelerate the conversations of how we can introduce autonomous vehicles into our mass transit system. I think that might have a little bit more opportunity. And as you know, we were already facing a pretty big shortage of human capital and drivers in our mass transit system. So some of that may be able to be absorbed and not have any negative impact. It could be just a wash. but I think I would say what autonomous vehicles may allow us to do in the future is give us more opportunity in being able to transport people at a much lower cost to different kinds of employment centers, maybe even further away than they're working right now. So I would say I'm always kind of a glass half full person. So I would maybe look at this as an opportunity down the road. And certainly from an expense standpoint as an individual, you know, we have an asset that's pretty expensive that sits in the garage most of the time and it depreciates as soon as you drive it off a car lot by 15% or more. And then you just throw a lot of money at it all year long. So if we didn't have to invest in that kind of overhead and watch a depreciating asset with really no great return on it at the end in some cases, that might be a different way to look at things as well. Now, the auto industry is certainly going to go through some huge shifts if and when this technology eventually takes over. But again, I think what's going to happen and what we're going to see first is autonomous vehicles really be accepted and used in the transportation of goods. So to keep our infrastructure and our supply chains moving along. I would say we may have the opportunity to see more drones than we would autonomous vehicles in the near future. And there's some really cool technology coming down the pike with drones, and especially drones in the way it would be part of our transit system.
Interesting. But it also makes me think about innovation in a different way. We've been spending time thinking about the technology, the innovation of technology and how it helps our lives and improves or changes things for us, presumably for the better. But there's also innovation in terms that we could talk about that's related to how we do things, not what we do it with, but how we do it. Now, certainly a perfect example is my office has been in isolation for about 12 weeks now. Well, we haven't seen each other in person for 12 weeks. We haven't seen a client in person. We're functioning, we're fully functioning, working the way we always have, other than we're doing it through Zoom. So as a result of the necessity to stay home, we've changed our way of doing things. What other kinds of innovations are you seeing around how we work and do things with each other?
Well, I think immediately what you're going to see, and this is a very interesting point, as an investor, and you know, I reported on stocks for a long time, and that's why we would sometimes have you on talking about where the markets were headed and what people should do. And I'm always grateful for your advice. And I think what I would look at now is what kind of when we talk to our primary employers in Westminster and in our region, we talk about, they're talking to us about what kind of overhead can they reduce and what kind of savings can they experience over the next 12 to 14 months. And what this work at home has been able to open up a lot of companies' eyes to is they don't need as much office space potentially as they thought they did. And so if they can reduce the amount of office space that they need by 20, 30, even 50% from what I've heard in some cases, by either having people come into the office only half the time or do a job share or have people work fully remotely if they want to, that's an immediate way to boost your bottom line. Now, the reverse effect, obviously, and on the other side of this are the landlords, the property owners, and the office building owners, and as their tenant base will be shifting in their need and demand. But what we saw at the City of Westminster, this is just an example. So we're a public entity with about 1,700 employees. We only had 20% of our workforce working remotely prior to COVID-19. So mid-March, early March or so. Within 72 hours, we completely flipped that. More than 80% of our workforce started working remotely. And that's been the countless experience from every industry, from every corner of our country and our cities. And that's going to be a hard thing for some employees to give up. They've enjoyed it. It certainly meets their lifestyle demand, flexibility of schedules, especially if you have children. And for a lot of people, they have found that the commute is just not worth it anymore. So I think you're going to see employers have to embrace this, and that's going to be the biggest kind of shift we see for the direct worker moving forward.
The other side of that, and myself in particular, I like being with people.
Yeah.
seeing you on a screen is not the same as seeing you over a cup of coffee or lunch or in our office. And I suspect some of our clients feel that way. There's an energy that we create when we're together that is missing, I think, when we're doing this. So it leads me to think about innovation around helping us feel safer and cleaner. Are there things that are happening there that you can shed some light on?
Cleaning is what I can unfortunately share a lot on. So as the innovation coordinator, I work in the city manager's office. So I work a lot on innovation, and I work a lot on lean and making ourselves more streamlined and technology and things of that nature. But I also, when we can't find cleaners or sanitizers to get our facilities back open, or procurement, they'll call me and say, hey, can you help us out here? So I've done a lot of procuring of a lot of things that I won't go into. But man, if only I had invented hand sanitizer, about 10 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation today from my house. I'd be in Tahiti somewhere. But yeah, I can tell you that cleanliness is what you're really going to see, I think, a huge boost in demand for, helping you feel safe. The only way we're really going to, I think, feel completely safe is when we get a vaccine that's proven, and we're likely not going to see that in mass and available to a lot of people until maybe mid next year, and then another full year of deployment before we get the herd immunity. So cleaning, you're seeing a lot of the oxidation cleaning with different kind of disinfectants. UV cleaning companies are coming on board now. You may have seen some of the robots. We've seen them in our healthcare systems where they send these robots into a room after a patient has left. The robot, which is about the size of a big, huge vacuum cleaner, about 5 feet tall, then lifts up a series of UV lights and then just spins those lights around, or does high intensity flashes, and within about 15 minutes, that room is sterile. Those kinds of things are going to be very, very popular, as we have to sanitize everything now, from planes after each use, to restaurant tables, to daycare centers, to doctors' offices, although we've always done that, but they're going to have to be clean in a different way. So man, I'd be looking at those businesses and those new technologies that are coming on.
Interesting. So speaking of medicine and healthcare, I know you serve on the board. I've forgotten the board. Is the hospital board.
SEL, Good Samaritan, SEL, hospital.
Yes, and I suspect there's some innovative things going on in the hospitals that would be new to us and interesting for us to hear about.
Yeah, you were mentioning, I think, that you're investing more in telemedicine now, which is wise and is not going away. So doctors' offices have had to switch to telemedicine, much like municipal offices had to do. So they were only seeing probably less than 5% of their patients via telemedicine. Now it's 95% of their patients. I wouldn't say that it'll stay at that level, because again, it is a human touch, human experience, important role. But telemedicine, they have found, can really fill in the gaps. And so especially for vulnerable populations like our senior populations, they're going to be doing telemedicine with them for the majority of their appointments. But when I talk to the docs, what they have found is that there is a greater connection, because they can have more frequent connections with them and bring them in person less frequently and still kind of keep that human touch going. So telemedicine is going to be big. Telemedicine will continue to be in demand for workplaces and where large gatherings such as, retirement facilities and assisted living and that sort of thing. It is going to take a while for us to get back to full speed on elective surgeries. As you and I were talking earlier, that hospital systems as a whole have taken huge hits. And a lot of people have been surprised by that, because, we see the images on the screen that the emergency rooms are overflowing and every bed is filled, and, intensive care units are filled. But the real bread and butter for almost every hospital system is in elective surgeries. And so when those were all put on hold and now just slowly creeping back, because people aren't feeling necessarily all that safe, but they are starting to get back into the regular mode. Technology in those arenas are going to be very, very important as well. So what can we do at home that we weren't doing before? When you talk about home dialysis, where technology was just starting to sort of creep in, where more and more people could do dialysis at home, well, now they're trying to get as much of that technology into homes as possible, so that there's a convenience factor, there's less interaction in group settings in a clinic, and through telemedicine, they can get the same kind of attention that they were from a healthcare professional as before. So just pay attention to all of those things. And I got to tell you, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer here, but we have been working as a group of municipalities in the northern region very closely with our county health departments, our state health department, and shoots, looking at where we're going to go in the next 6 months. And so you've heard a lot of predictions about a second wave. And I've seen a lot of the projections. Some of them are now becoming public. I'm pretty convinced we're going to see a second wave of some sort in early fall. And if we don't embrace these technologies and keep the pressure off of our healthcare system, we run the risk of going back into more stay-at-home orders. And that is not something our economy would be able to sustain again, I don't think.
Yeah, yeah. Very interesting. Well, thank you for that. I know you have a slideshow that you might like to present. Is it time to do that?
I think we could do that. I'll share my screen here and kind of go over a couple things. As we were preparing for today, I just wanted to kind of give a brief overview of what I think, and when I've talked to some of the experts, of where companies need to invest their time and resources. And when you see a company doing these things, you probably will find that they are being innovative and would be one to watch, either through their leadership and through their profits, obviously. So I titled this Innovation, which is a mindset and a must right now. And I think we all agree that it's extremely important to kind of have this mindset. Let me make sure I can get this going. First, I want to take a look at what changes we're going to experience probably over the next 12 to 24 months. These are predicted by the end of 2022. We're already seeing some of them right now. This quarantine state of mind is going to last quite a long time. We have just reopened our restaurants, at least in a limited capacity with some restrictions as of last Wednesday. Some of the predictions are that these social distancing requirements, the facial coverings or mask requirements, the plexiglass that you're going to see when you're going out will likely be in effect for probably another year at least. This quarantine state of mind is something that we may have to really embrace as we go to a possible second wave in the fall as the flu season kicks in. These changing international relations, you've already seen it happen through some of the rhetoric and leadership coming out of Washington right now, but how we're interacting with our Asia partners, especially China. How are we interacting with our South American partners as they go through probably the peak of their pandemic right now? So all the ways that we interact internationally, especially around business, is going to be getting a lot of attention. We talked about it already. Rethinking healthcare from soup to nuts is going to need to be a big point of discussion. It will require and probably another round of federal discussion about how it's funded, how it looks, how you make sure that you are prepared for a peak or a pandemic and peak demand so that you don't get overloaded. Imagine this: if our healthcare system had been able to have a capacity that was twice of what it was, and I'm not saying that we would have been able to invest in that, but even 30, 40% higher, some parts of the country may not have had to shut down completely. So healthcare is going to have to get a real workover, as well as education. And we'll start. I just had a meeting with one of our school districts. We have 3 school districts in our city, and I met with one of them today. And the way we are funding education, the way we look at education as an investment with a good return is going to have to change. These school budgets are not sustainable currently. So I'm predicting that we'll get through this year with a fair amount of discomfort in our school districts. But the way 21 and 22 school year is looking is pretty brutal. And they are likely going to have to cut out a lot of the external programs they brought on, maybe around career tech, and just focus on the very core subjects but it's going to be a real challenge for us. And then when you move into the higher education components, you may have seen a lot of the discussion about top tier schools. They will probably make it. When I say a top tier school, this is a school with an endowment of maybe 100 million plus. There are some of those, not many. And then when you get down to a kind of a tier two school, which I'm talking, the tier two schools would be like a state school, a large one, maybe like a CSU or a CU or Mines or UNC. Those institutions are going to have to also have a real hard look at how they provide their education, what the return is on their investment as far as tuition and housing and other kinds of programs, because that's maybe not a sustainable model as well. We're going to be going back into the saving mode. You and I talked about that a lot during the '08 downturn, and the saving rates were through the roof. And I think we're going to start to see some of that again. Restaurants are going to close. We have the last numbers that we got were a little scary. We may see anywhere from 15 to 20+% of our restaurants just not open back up. And those that do may not last more than a month or so. So that industry is going to take a long time to get back to any kind of normalcy. Free money might be on the way. Boy, we would certainly, what I'm talking about that is government stimulus. So we've seen trillions of dollars come into the pipeline right now. You're going to see the drum beat a lot louder for local governments and municipalities and states to ask for a big push of even more. It's not likely to get through the existing Congress that we have. Might get through the House. It's going to stall in the Senate. We've already seen one attempt at that. But without that, you're going to see a lot of smaller municipalities consider bankruptcy. And I would not be surprised if we saw some of that happen in Colorado within the next 3 to 6 months. I have heard of some of our smaller communities outside the metro area who are now running at 0% tax collection. Zero. Imagine running a business with no income, but you still have to come to work every day and provide basic services. You just can't do that for very long. Childcare is certainly going to be recognized, I think, as essential work as well. It's been extremely critical to keep our frontline people with childcare in place, and it is just part of our natural system. We've got to keep it going. And we're going to realize, at least from a lot of economists and futurists I've been talking to, that the American form of government and the economy is hurting right now, and it's going to take a long time to potentially heal. Now, that's kind of the negative side of things. I do want to say that innovation can help us along the way, and it's critical. I define innovation as creativity implemented. Other people may have some different definitions, but this one is a pretty simple one for me. And it's kind of at the intersection of feasibility and viability and affordability. But if you don't implement it, it's nothing but creativity. So implementation or innovation for me, and those companies that do it successfully will do this, the next 6 to 7 things. One is what I call costivation and delighting customers with that. The customer demand is not going to go away. So if a company can cut their costs without reducing their customer experience, I would say they're going to be very successful moving forward. So I call that costivation. So cutting costs while exceeding the customer expectation, and banding together with others is going to be a necessity. Working with who we used to think were our competitors is going to be critical. I'm about to lean into an opportunity here to have some discussions with other municipalities to talk about how we can join forces in providing basic services to our residents, but do them centralized and share the cost and overhead of all of that. That's something we've never talked about before. And I think you'll see that in the private sector as well. Keeping those loyal customers, deeply understanding them. The companies that we've seen be successful to date so far have used technology, have understand how their databases are so important right now so that they can reach out to customers individually and customize the offers. And there's so many new things coming online for people to be able to reach their folks via video, like you're doing through webinars ongoing. It just, anything you can do to increase the loyalty is going to be important. And spot reprioritized demands that, or what we call jobs to be done. coronavirus has certainly reshuffled our priorities, and some of these jobs to be done are much more important than ever. So when I talk about that, an example might be your dry cleaning, or it might be my quarterly visit to the doctor's office, or to the dentist, or any or to the mechanic, or having something done around the house. Those jobs to be done may open up some opportunities that we have yet to see. You probably know this, and many others have heard this, but Uber and Lyft, Uber especially, wasn't thought of until after the '08 downturn. So we didn't even have Uber until after that. I didn't realize this, but as I'm a big history buff, we didn't have the chocolate chip cookie until after the Great Depression. The chocolate chip cookie was invented through the Great Depression. So it was all around jobs to be done, right? Getting from one point to the other and satisfying a craving for a cheap sweet. That's what a chocolate chip cookie was all about. And adjusting to consumer habits. It is really hard. I don't know if you've been out and about lately, but it's hard to stay 6 feet away from somebody. And I come up to people all the time, and I'm a big handshaker, as you know, and I'm a big hugger, and I'm not a big face mask person. And so it's been really hard to do the fist bump. But we're going to have to get used to that and adjust to the new consumer habits, especially some industries like our restaurants. Rethinking this customer experience. If you're investing in a company that is not thinking critically about these new adopted habits, I probably would stay away from them. But many of the smart companies are looking at the habits that are going to stick around. Some of these won't be around. I can't imagine that face coverings are going to be something we want to continue after we don't have to. But moving into the long run, I would say gathering for, in small spaces for big gatherings, I think that's going to take a long time. And I'm talking events and big group meetings and things of that nature. I think it's going to be a while before we see that. But I'd leave you on a positive note. This is my favorite quote from President John F. Kennedy, where he said, the Chinese use 2 brush strokes to write the word crisis. One of those brush strokes stands for danger, and the other stands for opportunity. I do think it's up to us, Peter, to decide which brushstroke we want to embrace. I tend to like to say crisis and opportunity go well in hand for me. And not to be too overcome by the fear that comes with the change and shift that's required, and embrace the innovation, which is really, again, new way of thinking and creativity, at least for me, implemented moving forward.
Wonderful. Thank you. I was just thinking about, the job environment, how people are losing jobs, but how jobs are being created. I have 2 college children. I have a freshman in college and a junior. And they're not particularly concerned about the job environment just yet because they're another year or 3 away, but their parents are, or their parent is. Do you have some thoughts or guidance or advice as to how parents could steer their children to where these opportunities might lie?
Well, much like you, I'll just share personally, we have a freshman in college. You and I were talking about that, and we, thank goodness, have a senior, and he will be graduating in December. With an aerospace degree. We have encouraged him all along to look at aerospace and the future trends of aerospace, because the travel industry, as you know, can be pretty fickle. And what we're seeing right now is we saw the complete shutdown of that industry. But one industry that is growing rapidly, and thank goodness it's the one he did kind of look at the tea leaves and jump into, is the commercial, not the commercial, but the government top secret side on the military side of aerospace. It continues to grow and to remain very strong. And drone aviation is going through the roof. The technology there is pretty cool. And so he's not worried at all about what his future job prospects are like. My other son, on the other hand, is completely opposite, and he loves the outdoors. He's been a ranger in Boulder County for 4 years. So it's all about, the environment and forestry and firefighting for him. It may take a while for that to heal enough for him to have some good opportunities, but hopefully by the time he gets out of college, I think what we need to do with our students much earlier than we currently do is to have these kind of conversations. Listen, what do we think the industries of the future are going to look like? And to have more of an open dialogue with the industries themselves, the leaders themselves saying, what do you need from our workforce? There tends to continue to be that disconnect. And we need to also let students know that there is a future ahead for them. It may not look the same, the traditional 4-year degree that we grew up with. You go to the dorm, you stay in the dorm for a year, you go move off, or stay for 2 years and move off, and then you pay this a massive amount of money for a degree. And sometimes the degree is more of, could you just survive the gauntlet of the bureaucracy of college? And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's all part of the learning process, but it is going to require a different way of them delivering the goods for our kids. It's going to be rough for the first couple of years, I will tell you that. And I just hope that we don't forget that. For those of us who are blessed enough to have a job, and we don't forget that. And we give kind of a hand up to some of these young folks who will need some experience moving forward in a break.
They will. And one of the challenges I see, or one of the disappointments, is that the college experience is far more than sitting in a classroom and reading out of a textbook. It's the socialization, it's living independently, it's making choices on one's own. And I see my kids wanting to have that experience. It's the reason they all both went out of state, and I encourage that out of state experience, so they wouldn't be hanging out with the same friends that they created through high school, and they'd have expanded that. Those relationships are I don't know if they're in jeopardy or what. Do we think that this online college experience is going to continue this way, or will we be back in classes here in the next year or so?
I think the pattern, and we just got it, actually Pam just sent us a question. Do you think colleges will be more online and without sports, sororities, and fraternities? Here's the pattern that's being adopted fairly consistently right now. CU just announced it. CSU just adopted it last week. I think you'll find all the other major universities will do the same. So they're going to bring the students back in August for that 10-week period or so, or 12-week period, right up to Thanksgiving. When the students go home for Thanksgiving break, they will complete the rest of that semester at home online. And they'll do their finals in the last few weeks of the semester that way. I will tell you, I don't think that's going to be the pattern forever. That may be the pattern until we get a vaccine and we get a little more comfortable. Because I think you pointed out the college experience, and what Pam was asking about, it is very social. I think there's going to be a little bit less of the socialization probably for a couple of years, but you're going to see it come back, especially once we get a vaccine. But these universities, and if I get a chance, I'll send you, Peter, the interview on CNN by an analyst. He's a former college professor, and it was one of the best interviews I've ever seen on the future of higher ed. And he just laid it on the line. He goes, look, I've been part of the problem for a long time. We have seen an inflation rate for our 4-year colleges and universities increase at, 10 times the national average of inflation. And we haven't been really expected to do anything differently. But now they're going to have to do it differently. I'm not smart enough to know what that's going to look like, but it will be a combination of online and in person. I do think there will be less socialization for the next couple of years. I don't see how college sports will be able to pack in a stadium, full of 50,000 plus people on a regular basis, and that's going to hit their bottom lines fairly significantly. It'll be tough.
So we're basically saying that everybody's got to innovate in one way or another based upon what we're dealing with, how we're seeing changes to continue with some sort of life similar to what we've had before all of this.
We're going to try, right? We got to have some sense of normalcy, but it's going to be, there will be a lot of things that will not be exactly the way they were, 10, 12 weeks ago. And we got another question here, speaking of that, from Pam. Do you think people will be comfortable getting back into an Uber again? I won't get into some of the Ubers that I've stepped into, especially in New York or Chicago, where they're really these tiny little cars, and you're just, crammed in there with your coworkers. But there will probably be some uh, new mandates that Uber has for their drivers as far as barriers between the driver and the passenger. And again, back to your cleanliness. Are you cleaning your car after every use and that sort of thing? I think people will get comfortable with getting back in Ubers. I think it's going to take a while.
I think that's true. As we wrap up, I was just thinking about the SpaceX launch that we saw on Saturday, and it reminded me of my childhood when my parents woke me up in the middle of the night for the lunar module landing in 1969 for the first landing on the moon. Of course, that's innovation, and that I think we've missed that, and in some ways that the space program brought us together, and we're certainly a divided country these days. Not sure if there's a question there or not, but more of a comment that there's something here that gives us hope. It's innovative. What comes of that?
You mean from a space standpoint, or just from a space?
What comes from our new space program? Do we just go to these places and check things out? Does anything come of it that's positive and new that will help us in our lives?
Well, I'm a space geek, and so I am hopeful that we will continue to grow the space program. The moon is our next big adventure, and we have some local companies playing a big role in that, including Ball, Lockheed Martin, and Maxar Technologies. Ball and Maxar both based in Westminster, by the way, and they are going to do some amazing things with the moon base, with mining on the moon, with building the capability to go to Mars. When we get to Mars, in fact, we'll be launching a rover for the first time that will go to Mars, rove around. Roving is not that unusual anymore on Mars, but this rover will actually be collecting samples that will be sent back to Earth for study over the next 5 years or so. And so my hope is that we continue to prioritize that, because the technology and the future opportunities, not necessarily just going to Mars, but the technologies that are created to make that possible, make a lot of times our life better here on Earth. And I would certainly hope that we continue to invest in that. It's very exciting.
Very exciting, absolutely. I felt that same excitement when I saw it lift off on Saturday that I remember feeling 20 years ago when we saw.
It's our moonshot, right?
What's that?
It's kind of like our moonshot, although we go to the space station all the time, but it's the first time in 10 years that we've had a U.S. launched rocket carry humans into space.
Yeah,
that's way too long. So I hope it continues.
Yeah, I do too. We have a question from Julie. Do you think the healthcare for seniors will change, like more aging in place or home type of living?
I do. I think that is going to be a big demand. Of course, a lot of it will be on consumer demand. And the trend is yes. Prior to COVID, we were working on an opportunity to perhaps partner with, speaking of innovation, partner with some very innovative technology companies and home builders to actually build a senior development of the future, which would incorporate multi-generations, being able to have everything centered around a community center, have your medical center right there next to you so you could walk or golf cart to it or autonomous vehicle to it, so you could continue to age in place, have the support of your family, have the community kind of interactivity, and use technology a lot for telemedicine and for other ways of being. And this would be a completely green community. If you want to look at where I think the future of aging in place, Google Panasonic and the senior or the housing development of the future Panasonic in Japan. And you will find that what they've done with an entire city out there is absolutely amazing. Someday we'll have a demonstration project here in the States. I hope it's in Westminster. That would be my dream. Pre-COVID, we were moving in that direction. We'll see what happens afterwards. But in the short term, absolutely, aging in place and providing medicine in place is going to be the need. I think seniors are going to need it and want it and demand
And there are a lot of us.
it. Yes.
Now, I didn't necessarily mean to include you in the us, but you're getting there anyway.
I paused because I'm like, well, yeah, I'm in a vulnerable category now. So yes.
Yeah, that's sort of the way we have to live these days. It looks like we might have one more question here. How significant might job creation be along with the introduction of 5G technology?
It's predicted to be huge. 5G technology, however, is starting to stall in its implementation. So for those of you who may not know what 5G technology is, it is the next generation of giving me wireless data. And what we have now is 4G, and these are towers spread fairly far apart. So we don't have to have as many of them. 5G technology are towers, radio towers, wireless towers that are built much more compact and closer together so that they're able to do a much more consistent delivery of high-speed internet to your wireless device, which would open up a whole bunch of things. Autonomous vehicles that are more reliable, more types of healthcare technology right on your cell phone. I think yes, I do think it offers a lot of job creation opportunity if the deployment can speed up. And I think that's going to stall a little bit. It is certainly, it's certainly going to be a little challenging for municipalities to move and support the private sector in doing that. But we'll see what happens over the next 6 months.
Yeah, well, thank you. If there are any other questions, you've got another minute or so to ask it on the Q&A button down at the bottom. And while we're waiting for more questions, if there are going to be any, I'd like to thank you, Gregg, so much for being here with us today. It was enlightening, exciting, and as always, wonderful to spend some time with you.
Well,
I want to also remind the audience here that Gregg's presentation will go on to our website, so you can pull it off the website, or you can forward that presentation to others if you'd like them to see it. And our past presentations that we've held, the prior 5, are also going to be on the website as well. So thank you very much, Gregg. We appreciate you very much. Barbie, I think you're going to put a list of the next upcoming programs up on the screen for us. So the future of travel is next week. Dale Buckner, CEO of Global Guardian, an international program that protects people. It's a security company, international. Sorry, I lost my words. And then Vic Lombardi. I was playing golf with Vic yesterday, and he said that he'd be delighted to be one of our guest speakers. He's going to talk about sports in the time of COVID-19. So thank you all very much for attending and being here with us. If you have further questions of me or of Gregg, let us know. We'd be happy to answer them, and have a great afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.